Hello, Gareth here, and this is part 5 of my outdoor watercolor guide. So in part 5 we're doing considerations before painting an outdoor scene. So the first thing is about viewpoint. So when you think you've found your scene, your lovely scene, it's a really good idea to look at the scene from different viewpoints, just to make sure that you really have got the best viewpoint. You might be surprised. You might see a scene that's really good and will make a good painting, but if you look at it from a different viewpoint, maybe to the left or to the right or looking down a little, it might even look better, and it will just develop that artist's eye so that you begin to appreciate more and more about what makes a good painting. So after you've done that and you've got your best view, then it's good to do a really rough sketch, very rough sketch. And what you're trying to do is see that the composition is good. So often, so I'm a hypocrite because normally I don't do this, but the problem is you do a full painting and you spend a lot of time and you might paint it really well, but sadly the composition just isn't that good and it's not such a good painting. It's also difficult to throw away because you put all that time and effort into it and you maybe even painted it well, but if the composition is bad, then it's no good. So you really need to do a few sketches and look at them and think, is this really an exciting painting? Is it really wow or interesting? So I strongly recommend that, so you're not wasting your time. And of course that's going to develop your artist eye and your compositional skills. So do the sketches. And like I said, I don't normally do that. I suppose by now I have developed a bit of an artist's eye and I can see quite quickly what will make a good composition. But even I should do some rough sketches because it will just develop your abilities as an artist, to be honest. Okay, so that's the first thing, viewpoint and doing a quick sketch. The next thing is time. So my example here is about painting a sunset scene, especially by the sea, which I've often done. So the important point is when you're painting a sunset, as the sun gets lower, it begins to move quicker, and so you have to be ready for that. So it's much easier to paint the sunset early on because the sun is moving slower, and so you've got more time to get everything done and the shadows are correct and everything like that. So saying that, although it's best to paint the sunset early on, what you will find is that sunsets get more and more beautiful, and you will have this problem where you're painting a sunset and what you originally started painting is not maybe going to look as beautiful as what you're beginning to see as you paint the picture. And I don't think it's a good idea to change from the original image. It's too difficult. It's like you've already started and you will have to change too many things. But it's important to know that what you can do is take a photograph and then in the studio or at home have a go at doing that painting. But your original painting will also help you, I think. It will give you an idea of what the atmosphere was like and the basic light scene and what it looked like, and it will help, I think. And of course, at the very end of the sunset, if you're lucky, you get that very fleeting and glorious glow when the whole sky just glows. It's absolutely beautiful and impossible to paint because it's so fleeting. So it's good to take a photograph of that. I'm not sure you can always get the exact same colours on your camera or cell phone. That's quite difficult. You have to try and remember that, but you'll get a good idea of like the pattern of the sky, the clouds and so on. So it can be really helpful to take a photograph of that. So if you're prepared, then that really helps. And also at sunset time, because the sun is beginning to move quicker, then the shadows are moving very quickly. They're not just moving, they're also changing shape. They're becoming much longer. So it's really important to remember your original shadows. In fact, it's a good idea to draw them, and even strongly, because when you paint them, you're going to use a dark mix. I mean, shadows are normally the darkest thing in your picture, so that will hide your pencil lines. And to be honest, I don't really mind seeing pencil lines in a painting. So don't draw them too lightly, because if you draw the shadows lightly in pencil, once you start painting, it might be difficult to see them. So I would draw them not super strong, but fairly distinctly and with hatching, so that it's really clear where they are. And so when you come to paint your shadows, you can easily see them on your paper and easily paint them. And if you do decide to change and paint the shadows that you're seeing at that very moment, then there is a good chance that you will make a mistake and it might not match with the sky and where the position of the sun is. So it really is much better to stick with the original image or fairly close to that. So that can really undo you when you're painting a sunset, yeah? So and also you paint the shadows last, and that's very important, because in your painting you've got drying stages. So this means from the original beginning of the painting to the point where you begin to paint the shadows, there's quite a bit of time lapse, which means the shadows will probably have changed position and changed shape. And so that's why it's so important to stick with the original shadows and also to have drawn them on your paper. So I hope that's helpful. And hopefully you're going to see a painting here of a shadow that I did, and it was huge. Towards evening time, as the sun goes down and down, shadows become absolutely amazing, really long and dramatic, and they're lovely to paint. But if you want to paint those really dramatic long shadows, then you're probably not going to have enough time to paint them on spot. It's probably going to be better to take a photograph. Although if you try to do it all in one go, you might be able to do it. It's very tricky though. So now I'm going to talk about a few other things like weather. So you have to think about the weather when you go out somewhere and you start to paint. So you have to think about the chance of rain. So will it rain? And if it does rain, are you prepared? Have you got a parasol? Is there a tree nearby that you could use? Those kind of things. Next, you have to think about how the weather will become. So for example, on an autumn day, it starts cold here in Japan, very cold, a little bit uncomfortable, but around midday and from 12 to 3 o'clock, it can become really hot, very uncomfortable. So you have to think about that. It's very, very important, yeah, because you need to be fairly comfortable in order to do a fairly good painting. And one of the worst things that you need to think about is wind. So are you in a very exposed place, or is it just very windy? Because it is so difficult to paint in the wind. You need to make sure that you have I recommend a small pad, because bigger pads will very easily begin to blow and even fly up into the air quickly, suddenly, and even hit you in windy conditions. A big gust of wind can just make it fly up into your face, into your body or whatever. You don't want that. A smaller pad is a bit better, but even with a smaller pad, you need to make sure it's firmly attached to your easel. And you need to make sure that your easel is weighted down. So you can add a bag or a water bottle and tie it around your easel, or hook it on. Sometimes there are hooks on easels, things like that. So try and find something like that to hold down your easel. It's very important. Even if at first there's no wind, later you might get wind. And it's so upsetting when you're painting a picture and it's going really well and you're starting to get nervous, like, oh, am I going to finish it? Is it going to work? And then suddenly, as you're painting a small detail, a gust of wind comes, boom, moves your paper, and you mess it up. It's a bit soul destroying. So you don't want that experience. So definitely just weigh down your easel if there's any chance of wind, and do be prepared for that. So other inconveniences are passersby. So if you're painting in a fairly public place or a tourist place, you will get passersby, and I think it's always a good idea to like just almost like be an actor and keep it simple, you know, just say like, oh, thank you, you know, thank you. Be polite, yeah? Don't be sensitive. And some people might be a bit rude, some people might be a bit strange, some people might be very friendly, but just nod, and whatever they do, just ignore it and carry on painting, yeah? That is so important. You just have to act and be polite, yeah? And expect that that might happen, yeah? Okay. What else? So on a country road with no traffic, sometimes a car might come along, and sometimes very suddenly, because people are sometimes very familiar with those roads and they can drive very quickly. So you have to be prepared to move your gear quickly. So can you pick everything up in one go and move it without things dropping and without leaving anything behind? And is there like a place, like a little escape route where you can stand by the side of the road? It is important. It really is important, yeah. And so it's just a good idea to be prepared for these potential problems, right? So that you have a good experience and hopefully create a good painting. So now I'm going to talk about different kinds of terrain and the problems you might get. So the first one is mountains. And my first advice is don't go to the top of a mountain with all your gear, especially your easel. And yes, I did do that. Look, I've got a painting to prove it. Well, I just made that from my imagination, but I really did go up that mountain and I really did take my easel. It's much easier to take a small backpack, to have a sketchbook, just 3 colours and 3 brushes, no easel. I'm in the process of doing a course now that shows you how to do beautiful paintings, really beautiful paintings with just 3 colours and 3 brushes and just sketchbook paper. So look out for that, and just to let you know, it can be done, yeah, and you can make great pictures. And also sometimes you just want something like a sketch and a photograph, and then in the studio you will develop that into your bigger picture, and you're more finished and more flash painting at home, yeah, where you've got time and comfort and whatever. So what else? So yeah, do take a photograph of the scene, even if you paint it, and do the picture again, yeah, at home in the studio. Always do that, yeah. It's a really good practice. But maybe I don't always do that, but it's also fun to do, right? What else? You don't even have to go all the way to the top of the mountain. So I've got a few images here, I think. So one is the picture I did when I went up another mountain, but only partly up. I went basically up this path, which was the opposite side of the mountain I was going up. Hope you follow here. Sorry, this is very improvised. And basically I was going up so I could actually look at the mountain that I was going to climb up, and the view was wonderful. Actually, at first I wasn't sure about this painting that you're seeing now, and I was actually thinking of throwing this away. But then a year or two later I looked at it again and I thought, it's not that bad. So yeah, be careful of that danger. But also the thing is, you don't have to go all the way to the top. You can even go in the opposite direction and look at the mountain you're going to climb and paint that. And then the next painting you're going to see is one I did when I was halfway up the mountain. And I just saw this beautiful view, and I just painted it, and I was very happy with that image. I think sometimes and here's another one I'm going to show you of a painting I did on the way up a mountain called Kuju Mountain, and this was actually my best scene. I think this was better than the scene from the top of the mountain. So don't think the mountain top is going to be the best viewing place. It's most likely going to be on the way, and that was true in this case. Maybe the first one I showed you of me with the easel, that mountain really did have fantastic views, but some mountain tops, the views are very they're not going to make such a good painting. They might look fantastic, they might look very panoramic and amazing, but they're not always going to make a good composition. And sometimes it's a scene on the way up that's going to be your best scene. So please look out for that scene and be prepared for that. And another point is, don't stay on the mountain top too long. I did that. I was painting a sunset and I got stuck on the mountain all night because it became pitch black and I couldn't see the path back. I didn't have my cell phone, I didn't have a flashlight. Very stupid, but it's easy for that to happen. You'll be surprised, you know, so don't do that, or at least take a flashlight with you. And maybe take a photograph rather than do a painting of the sunset, so it just takes a moment and then you can get down safely to your car. And the final thing is once again, do use your common sense. So I'm really talking now to overly enthusiastic artists like myself and even photographers, because sometimes you're walking around the mountain top, leaning over edges, looking for that fantastic shot, and to be honest, it's not worth it. It's not worth leaning too far over the edge, you know. Really be careful. Honestly, people do fall off. I have a real example. So there was this famous Japanese animation artist, so he made this really super popular animation series here in Japan. I forget what it's called, but anyway, it was super popular. So he was one of those lucky artists, unlike me, who was super wealthy, had made it. And what did he do? He climbed up a mountain and he was taking a photograph and he leaned over just a little too far, lost his balance, fell over and died. So it happens, yeah, it really happens. So don't do that. I mean, if you really want to do that, and I don't recommend it, lie down. I know it maybe looks a bit silly, but who cares? Your life is more important, right? Lie down along the surface of the rock and then look over. Please don't waste your life. What a waste. What a waste. Anyway, the next thing is sea scene. Sea scenes. So if you're painting a sunset over the sea, remember that final glow. I told you about that. And also just remember that as the sunset progresses, it gets better and better. So yeah, and also you'll be very exposed at the seaside, or when you're painting a sea scene. There's a real high chance of it being windy, so you need a small pad. It needs to be attached to your easel, and your easel needs to be weighted down. Otherwise, there's a good chance you're not going to have a pleasant painting experience, and you're not going to make a nice painting. Another important point is, if you really want to paint those evening sunsets near the end when they look spectacular, then one way you can do that is to do it all in one go. There's a special word for it, and it sounds great, probably Italian, but I can't remember it. Now, I've done this a few times, and hopefully you're going to see an example here if I find one that I've done. And the problem with doing it all in one go is you really have to be good at wet and wet, wet in wet technique, and timing is so important. Yeah, not too dry, not too wet. If it's too wet, it floods, it goes everywhere, right? Actually, I need to stop the video here. 20 minutes. I'll be back soon. Okay, so to continue, if it's too wet, it's just going to flood. Even with the sky, you need to be careful about that. It's going to go everywhere. And if it's too dry, then it's basically, you're going to get marks, and it's just going to look stuck on. So that timing is really important, and it's actually a good thing to paint, to develop your wet in wet technique actually. And with me, my own personal experience is sometimes it goes horribly messy, and I'm very, very disappointed, and sometimes it looks great, but it is something that takes a long time to master, I think. So I've done hundreds of paintings now of sea scenes. I've got a favorite place, and so many times I screwed it up. So please don't get disappointed. Just enjoy the process, and know that eventually when you get to painting 100 or whatever, it will start to come together. You have to have that patience and that endurance for failure. The next terrain is rivers. So problems with rivers are, especially normal rivers, is you can get swarms of flies, and that's horrible. And in summertime you can also get snakes. I forgot that. Twice I saw snakes in Japan by the river. They often they're in the long grass. Just be careful. Normally I don't go into the river, and I don't go too close to the river, but you can, in the middle of a hot summer, go to mountain rivers, and they can be freezing cold, and really, really super cold, and you don't get any flies. So they are good places to go to, and I'm just going to show you some paintings now that I did. And this is a beautiful river with many waterfalls, and it's in Kumamoto Prefecture in Japan, and I think it's called Kikuchi Keikoku. Kikuchi Keikoku. Beautiful place, and I've been there 2 or 3 times. So it's a good idea to look around your local state or prefecture for beautiful rivers. And mountain rivers are very nice in summertime because they're cool and you don't get flies, and it's a pleasant experience to paint. So the next terrain is farms. So when you climb over a fence, remember that there could be bulls around. Yeah, I did this one as well. I was walking around this field, all over the field, and in the distance I suddenly saw lots of bulls. So really they were far away and they didn't bother me, but they were in the same field. I don't know what I would have done if they had come. So it's probably a good idea if you enter a big field. This was a huge field with it was sloped, so you couldn't actually see the edge, and there was trees in this field, and so things were hidden. So in my defense, I couldn't see the bulls at first. It was only when I'd walked halfway across the field that I saw them, and at that point I decided to carry on because the scene was so beautiful. And I also looked for places where, you know, I could climb a tree, or places where I could jump over a river or something like that, well, a stream, and probably escape the bulls. But if you look at the painting I did, it was worth it, right? Maybe not, but I was so happy with that painting. So do be careful of animals, farm animals, and other animals as well, yeah? So it can be very alarming. And also sometimes you get angry farmers. Yes, I've had that experience too. So remember, you can get angry farmers, but to be honest, most of the farmers I've met in Japan are super nice, and they've even given me food. They've given me like honey that they've made. They've given me potatoes that they've baked in a fire, and they've given me all kinds of goods. Okay, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and happy painting.